return on investment on that 15K is 24 grand a year. Boom, you're gonna be able to do that with confidence. You're gonna get yeses. Property 1 is arbitrage, property 2 is co-hosting, and then by that time, that'll be like 3 to 6 months down the line. And then we just kind of rinse and repeat from there. This is competitive now, Sam, so like you're gonna have people essentially fighting to work for you, which is nice. So we got this one here. This one's doing 133K. Important thing is gonna be staying consistent, Sam. One thing I get asked a lot is like, okay, what is the biggest area where people fail? And it's honestly just 5 deals over the next 12 months. Certainly possible. What's likely gonna happen? All right, guys, so we're sitting down with Sam, one of the Airpreneur mentees here, and what we're doing today is we're building out his Airbnb roadmap and game plan for the next year to achieve his financial goals. So Sam, thanks for doing this with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're looking forward to mapping out a plan with you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start out just kind of by learning a little bit about you. And before I dive into the who, what, when, where, why, and like how we're gonna craft this, building an Airbnb arbitrage or co-hosting portfolio, I wanna hear from you first. Like, what are we doing this for? And could you tell us a little bit about, yourself, your background?
Yeah, sure. So, my wife and I have been together since early college. We're late 30s, early 40s. Pretty set in our careers, but I come from a family that owned a business. We owned dry cleaners locally where I'm from. And unfortunately, my grandfather ended up selling it before I could even graduate and say, hey, I'd like to take over the business. So I've always seen like what business ownership could offer. Mm-hmm. He spent his summers golfing. They had, campsites. He went to Alaska every year to hunt. He went out to Montana to hunt. Like, there was a lot of freedom in what he did after he put in a ton of work. So I've always noticed that and said in the back of my mind, I want to eventually own some type of a business. What it is, I don't know. So, we dabbled with some multi-level marketing early on in our courtship, and we did end up making some money, but it wasn't what we wanted. Mm-hmm. And then, we had 3 kids, jobs got a little bit more intense, and it kind of fell by the wayside. So, I've been always on the lookout for something, and again, 3 kids, we need to move out of our current home because there's not a lot of space. And with today's market and economy, you can still make a decent amount of money, which we do. You could always use a little bit more to help build that safety net, maybe provide more for your kids, maybe go to Disney because that's expensive, And so, I had come across Adam's ads on Instagram. I was like, okay, I've actually thought about doing some type of Airbnb in real estate a few years ago, so let me look into this. And last year, my sister's real estate agent, was talking with her, and she's like, yeah, I don't know if you want to do rentals, like traditional rentals. The market isn't that great. People aren't really renting long term in our area. You might get someone good, you might not. So it was kind of, I think, perfect timing to run into your ads and join the school network. Did all the free stuff that I could in researching, even independently of your group, and it seems like, okay, this is a viable solution to generate some extra income. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head too, which is like there are some other income generating opportunities out there, but at the end of the day, most of them have a really large capital requirement and a bit more risk, kind of like traditional rentals. And we're seeing the dynamic of the market shift a little bit more right now to where rentals are not that fruitful, right?
Right.
So it sounds like, kind of going back to what you wanted, the example that you had given with your grandfather's business, it's you want to run your own business, right? You want to have your own income, and then I'm assuming it's to like ultimately have control of your time and freedom because of that business vehicle, or is this just supplemental income on top of your job to afford those vacations in different times?
I think it's a little bit of both. Right now, what I do in the manufacturing space, I really enjoy. I get to travel the United States, help companies improve themselves, and that's really like one of my core tenets is helping others. So whether it be someone on the street holding the door for them or helping a company improve their processes and their business, that's what makes me happy. But to even just replace my wife's income, I think that would be huge. It would make her really happy, I'm sure.
Yes, all right, so you're what I would consider somebody who wants to be work optional, right?
Yeah.
Like you enjoy what you do, you want to make enough income to where it's like, hey, if I wanted to step away or if I had to like maybe just like drop my hours or commitment to it, I could.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's also maybe you want to create this income stream to where like your wife could stay home full time. And that's like step one, right?
Right.
Perfect, okay. So if your wife's at home, right, it sounds like that would give you a little bit more freedom, flexibility to just kind of focus on your professional life. Kids are taken care of, right? You've got a big family, which is awesome. I've always talked about how I want like a, commotion at the dinner table every night. So that's cool. So, all right, goals here. One of the goals that we're going to put down is become work optional, right?
Okay.
It's not just about financial freedom, quote unquote.
Right.
It's like you find pride and fulfillment in what you do, and it's just a matter of like having enough supplemental income to make work optional, and then create a better work-life balance with your family.
Yep.
And then also, I'm going to put quote unquote retire wife, right?
Yeah.
Now, realistically, what sort of target cash flow would we need to see in order to at least make this first thing come true, which is retire your wife?
Probably between 5 and 10,000 a month.
Okay.
Would enable us to not only replace our income, be a little bit more, so that the rising costs of gas, food, gas, electricity, all that jazz. We'll have that cushion, right? You don't want to exactly replace the income, because with the cost of living and everything that can go on, then you could end up being negative in the year.
Right.
So
right. Okay. Let's get a little more hyper specific on this too.
Sure.
Right. Like if 5 to 10K a month, that's a big window, right? So like realistically, if we were able to get you to the point where you're cash flowing, like profit after taxes, take home $6,000-7,000 per month, do you think that would be a sufficient amount where your wife could say, all right, I can step out of? Okay. So we're gonna aim for that $6,000 to $7,000 a month mark. I want to kind of like fine tune it a little bit more and get a little more specific. So I'm gonna put this here, and what we'll do is like we will
7 to 10 works.
7 to 10 works. What we'll do is we'll kind of get specific on like what that would take from an Airbnb portfolio perspective.
Sure.
But the cool thing is that's really right? Like that's actually genuinely very doable, and that's the beautiful part about this model. You don't need that huge capital requirement. And that's actually this is legitimately like a 9 to 18 month goal, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how quickly you move. Because the average property is gonna net us 1 to 2K a month. And I mean, we've had some people that in this community that have profited up to 3 to 4K per month off of a single unit, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's the exception of the rule. We wanna try to aim for some solid workhorse units that we feel confident in that are gonna meet this criteria. So we'll get into the specifics of what that'll look like, but cool thing is that's like a realistic goal, Sam. So. Which is really, really nice. Now, outside of that, anything else, any other non-monetary goals that are coming with this that you want this portfolio to do? Like, do you want it to, do you want to build out the operations so it is a little bit more passive? Or is this something where you want to hold off on building out the operations, just kind of get the ground running and then kind of work on the operations down the line when your wife is retired? Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think building that foundation, because I think it's very important that any business owner or general manager or anyone knows how to do everything. That way, if there are any problems, whether it be maybe you hire a friend to run some things, if they have questions, you know exactly how to answer the questions they have. Or if for whatever reason they decide to move on, you can still step in and run the business without stepping back. So I would say learning all that, building the foundation, and then getting into a passive style business.
Perfect. And that actually is, I think you're looking at it the right way too. It's like you're going to learn the most by getting involved in the day-to-day a lot at first. So that way, you can more effectively train your operations, like your virtual assistants, set up the softwares right down the line. But then in the future, you'll feel like you've earned it, you actually have a little bit more control over the business if you ever have to step in during a fire or whatever.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend, and we'll talk more specifically about this, is yes, you do everything yourself up until we get to property 3 to 5. Then we can start pivoting the operations, hire a virtual assistant, get to all that other stuff. But what I'm gonna put here in our goals here is, I'm gonna put up top here kind of 12-month goals, right? Bear with me here, man. 12-month goals, become work optional, retire wife at 6 to 7K per month, and then eventually make portfolio, right? Cool. So these are all attainable things, and we're going to talk about how we can do each one of them, right?
Okay.
Now, just so I can get an assessment of what strategy makes the most sense starting off, right? Because there's a couple of different ways to skin the cat, right? We have arbitrage, where we'll rent a property, we'll get it live, we'll furnish it on business credit, so you don't have to pay that out of pocket, and then you profit the difference over rent and expenses. We've got co-hosting, where we'll just find a property that could be a really nice Airbnb. We take over the management, you take a percentage each month. Both have their pros and cons. Determining which strategy makes the most sense. One side of that is market, right? Based on regulations, based on the types of properties. The other side is finances. So just out of curiosity, we don't have to get too specific, but just so I can help you out on this, from a financial situation, is your credit kind of in good standing, 600 to 700 plus?
Yep.
Okay, so that's good, because that'll allow us to leverage business credit. So I'm gonna put 600 to 700 plus. Do you have, good debt to income ratio roughly, and just good history of payments on time? Okay, good credit card utilization, all that stuff. Now, from a capital perspective, right? This is going to come into play on arbitrage, because we need a little bit of money to play with on security deposits, and then just basic startup expenses, LLC, website creation, stuff like that. Do you have 5 to 10K liquid, or is that kind of inaccessible?
I would say probably inaccessible right now, but we might be able to work with that.
Okay. Do we have at least 5K liquid cash?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is good, and here's why. When this comes into play on what strategies we're going to focus on, right? We want to be able to scale. We want to be able to scale, but we don't want our capital to limit our ability to scale, right? So let me put it this way. When we start kind of strategizing what this action plan is going to look like, we've got two options, arbitrage and co-hosting. So what we're likely going to have to do, because we have about 5K liquid cash ready to invest in this, that will help you get that first deal off the ground, because we're going to use that for the security deposit, right?
Right.
We're going to go rent that property. Let's say it's $3,000 a month. Boom, you could pay that security deposit. We'll teach you how to make sure that you get first month rent free, and then you're off to that. Will also limit how quickly we can sign the second one, right?
Right.
Which means deal number one, we're probably going to focus on arbitrage. Deal number two, probably going to focus on co-host. And what that'll allow you to do is land several properties over the course of the next year and potentially hit this income goal of 6 to 7K without really having to save up more capital, right?
Okay.
And then as your portfolio grows and you start gaining more revenue from that property number one, then you'll be able to use that to invest in a property number 3, 4, 5, whatever it is.
Sure.
Make sense?
Yep.
So we can kind of get a little more fine-tuned on that, but I think that's a good starting point, and that gives me a good assessment of like what makes the most sense, right?
Okay.
So first and foremost in our action plan is we want to figure out what our target market's going to be, and really just go through a couple of things to make sure that our target market is a good one for this model, right? So I think we talked a little bit before this. You were considering Pittsburgh, right, as an ideal first market, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any particular reason why? Is it just like something that's in driving distance?
It's driving distance. Yeah.
Okay. Now, outside of Pittsburgh, what would be the next closest ideal market?
Next closest ideal market would probably be maybe middle PA or eastern PA.
And again, it's basically due to like travelability and accessibility?
Yeah.
Okay, so the cool thing about this model, Sam, is you don't have to be local to wherever you're launching your units, right? We had launched all of our first units actually in Pittsburgh, but for us, it was a 4-hour drive, which I'm not suggesting that you should do for your first run around. I think you're doing the right thing, which is starting in a market that is drivable, so you can get your hands on your first few launches, and you get really used to it. You understand what it looks like to orchestrate that. Then you can pivot outside of that market into other markets, and it's going to be so much more easier and digestible. Make sense?
Yep.
So I totally agree with Pittsburgh as a starting market, because that also plays really nicely into the first phase of validating the market, which is the regulations. I just happen to know from launching there are none, which is really great. That makes it easy for you to do either of the strategies, right? So from a regulations perspective, you are good to go. No regulations as of now. Now, for somebody else who's watching, or if this was like a different student, what we might do is just Google search city short-term rental regulations, and then we would look at the government website, we would try to interpret that a little bit, and then we would understand, is arbitrage possible? And if arbitrage is not possible, we would say, let's just focus on co-hosting for now, because it's in your backyard. Now, since there's no regulations here, we can start with arbitrage, right? So then what would make sense is we want to look at kind of the profit potential of the market to see, okay, like profit-wise, like what makes the most sense here in this market. So really quick, let me connect to Wi-Fi. Lack of prep, dude. What was that?
You're married, yeah.
I am. Do you mind if I jack your room number for this?
523.
Thank you. And it's Raneri, right?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. All right, cool. Do you know where your family's from? My family's technically from I was originally gonna actually record, like use a loom and then take the audio into the loom, but I tried doing it at home and the audio didn't come out as good, so I didn't want to do it. So I'm just gonna, when we get it to the editor, I'll just send him the audio file and then also send him just a lot of the stuff okay, cool. All right, so Sam, what I'm doing is I'm pulling up AirDNA, and we're gonna do kind of a rough glimpse of the market to see what makes the most sense from a profit potential perspective, because like what we wanna figure out now is not like, we don't have to get hyper specific, we just wanna see like, is there proof of concept that we're making, that there are people making money in that market? And then if so, where and what types of properties make the most, right? Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna search the market as a whole here on AirDNA. We're gonna go to Pittsburgh, boom, short-term rental markets, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then one thing I really like to do, I don't know how far you made it into the content. Yeah, I think you said you went through module 1, right? Which is like the foundations, creating your LLC, understanding how to access business credit, et cetera. But then module 2, we kind of talk about doing market analysis, property analysis, and pitching property owners, right? Yeah. Now I know you said you were going through module 2 and it's a beast. It'll take you a few days, but what I like to do when I'm doing this is I want to eliminate any properties that are less than 180 days available. This allows me to only look at properties that likely have the highest likelihood of being accurate data and numbers on AirDNA, right? And then I'm also going to eliminate anything that has less than 11 reviews, because it's like if it has less than 11 reviews, chances are it's not like a full-time year-round listing, and we can't trust the data. We can't trust the numbers on here, right? So I think I already have those filters on. So inside this market, what I want to do is just kind of get a quick glimpse of the top short-term rentals in the market. And what we want to do is we want to scroll through some properties that are like realistic properties that like you and I could obtain on the regular rental market, just to make sure that there's like proof of concept, right? I don't want to look at this guy that's like sleeps 16 people and it's like this mega mansion thing, because like realistically, are you going to find that in the rental market tomorrow? Probably not. But if we can find some proof that like, hey, there are single family homes located in certain parts of the city that make the most sense, great. So like this one jumps out at me right away. It's just kind of a simple, quaint, like old Victorian style home. It's really nothing too drastic. I'm just gonna pop that open in a new tab. And same with this one, boom. Just kind of get a quick glimpse of things, just so we get an understanding of like, okay, like what is it in the market that is working? This one here, boom, and we'll pick like one more. Without like spending all day on this, Sam, what I'm looking for is like, okay, are these realistic properties that you and I can arbitrage? Is there proof that they're making money? And if so, like what are some things that we want to note, like location, part of the city, etc. Okay, so we got this one here. This one's doing 133K, right? And first let's just validate this is a real active listing. Okay, it is, boom. And if we look at this property, you know, it's nice, but it's not like anything spectacular, right? Some things to note on this property, just doing a quick glance. I mean, this listing could actually be improved, but it's a 4-bedroom house. And if we want to hone in on specifically the part of town that it's in this like East Liberty area, just kind of north of Trader Joe's. Boom. So this is kind of like the, what neighborhood would you consider this? Is East Liberty? Is that right?
East Liberty. Yep.
Okay. So we got this guy. And then we've got this one. This is also a 5-bedroom house. This is actually north of where we were before. So this is actually in East Allegheny. Same thing, not too spectacular, regular 5-bedroom house, just kind of a generic, you know, renovation style, etc. Yeah, there's really nothing too spectacular about this. What I'm noticing, Sam, is that like its head count is important, bedroom count is important, proximity to the major attractions, because everything that I'm looking at here is like pretty accessible to all of the major things. You know, you've got like the PNC like stadium here, you know, you've got downtown, you've got the schools, the hospitals, etc. So it looks like everything is pretty accessible to the major parts of the city, right? Then we've got this one, 6 bedrooms. So common theme here, lots of bedrooms, lots of heads, right? That automatically puts you in a really good spot to be a 6-figure contender. Now, just because Adam and I had operated in the city before, I do know that some of the better, more profitable areas as well, Strip District, Lawrenceville, and I'm trying to think of where else we were. I know those 2 areas are pretty good as well, as including the 2 other areas that I mentioned here. This last one is also, it looks like, close to that.
It's Oakland, near University.
Okay,
yeah.
Not too far from like that East Liberty area as well. So it looks like really anything that's in between the rivers here, you know, could potentially be a profitable unit. I mean, you could see all these other units around here that are doing 90K, 80K, 100K, etc. Right? And on top of that, I think what's also going to be important is bedroom count, right? Now, theoretically, now what we want to do is we just want to roughly figure out, okay, we have proof that these properties are doing 100K, 120K, 130K. Let's actually see, like, do the rentals in that market make the most sense? Like, do we see like a correlation between that and some of the rentals that are available in the market? Because what would make the most sense for you, Sam, for you to get to that first like 6 to 7K per month, right? We can start by arbitraging that first property, right? Because you have the capital for that first security deposit. And if we can find a property that is potentially a 6-figure producer like that nets you, let's say 2, 3K, then that sets you up really nicely to just kind of like, you got the one deal, you've got your first unit up and running, you can finance using your credit, the furniture, and then you got the experience, you got the unit up and running. It will make it that much easier for you to go to another property owner and say, look at what I've got here, I'd like to co-host your property. Right. And then you don't even need capital for that second deal. Yeah. And then if that second property nets you 1,000, yada yada, we only need 4 or 5 to make this happen, right? So really quick, what I just want to do is kind of get a glance at things. I'm going to narrow down my search by like 3 bedrooms and higher. Actually, I'm gonna go 4 bedrooms and higher, and then I'm gonna go all filters. I'm gonna make sure I'm looking specifically at houses because that's what we saw, and then 4 rent by owner, and just kind of get a rough idea of like what the rents are. So just kind of going back to some of those properties that we saw earlier, right? Like this one might be a little bit similar in just like the overall style and design. I'm just getting a rough idea of rents. This one, I don't really know, nah, that one's not that great. Let's keep going here a little bit. I just wanna get a rough idea, Sam, of like rents.
Yeah.
Of what we'd be looking at. So far I'm seeing like, if you're gonna go 4 bedrooms and higher, you're probably getting close to like $4,000 a month in rent. Do you think that's pretty cohesive with what you've seen in the market so far?
Yeah, I think so for a home. And then apartments are probably closer to the 2 mark, like a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment.
Got it, okay. So it looks like, so the cool thing is we've seen that single family homes can do 100K plus, right? And if we use one of our arbitrage rental calculators that you have access to, right? If we were to find a property that was doing, right? Because what I want to do, Sam, is see like how much is this property going to be roughly producing per year, and then like what sort of rent range. If we were roughly in a certain rent range, now we know how much we could potentially profit off of that. Because ideally, we want that first arbitrage property to cash flow up 2K a month plus. So if we know that 4 bedroom homes, right, are gonna potentially do 100K a year or more, I'm gonna basically run this calculator at about 95,000 just to like do the rough math. Make sense? Then if we're in that rough rent range of about $3,000 a month, and let me make these expenses a little conservative. This will all come together in a second here, but I'm gonna put rough utilities and I'm gonna bump them up a little bit to be conservative, just because again, like a 4 bedroom house is a pretty large home. If you found a 4 bedroom house plus that has the potential to do $90,000 a year or more, and the rent was $3,000, you could potentially cash flow up to 3K on that property, right? So that's kind of a good rough starting point of like where we want to aim. I do think this is back of napkin math. I think if we got really hyper specific, we could probably find something that would be in the 2K range, but that's still very substantial. Because if you're investing 15 grand in furniture on that property, it's like you're putting in 15, you're getting $2,000 a month in profit. You get that first month rent free. Like you're gonna pay yourself back in 6 months or less, and then your return on investment on that 15K is 24 grand a year. You know what I mean? Like that's really substantial.
Yeah.
So basically, if we're gonna map this out specifically into kind of like an action plan for you, right? What it would be is that property one, right? Property one would be arbitrage, right? We're gonna arbitrage that first deal and we're gonna aim occupancy, right? Occupancy as in a 4 bedroom unit or higher, right? Because now we've seen that there's a lot of proof and demand that those types of properties could potentially produce a lot of revenue, which would also translate to better cash flow for you. You wanna ideally make your first deal a banger, right? You wanna make it like profitable and kind of give you the momentum to easily roll into the next, right? Because since we only have a limited amount of capital to play with, right? If we can get that first property to cash flow a decent amount, that also means the second property will be that much easier to get, or the third or fourth, whatever it is, right? So we want to aim for occupancy, meaning like 4 bed plus, 3 to 4 bed plus. And then we want to validate that property with data. So property one would be arbitrage. Property two is likely gonna have to be co-hosting, right? Because what's gonna happen is if you exhaust that entire 5K on that first deal for that first security deposit, because that first security deposit might be $3,500, right? Then you don't have much capital to play with on deal number 2. So our options are we either sit on our butt and we wait another 6 to 8 months to do deal number 2, or we just launch another one very quickly. And then what property number 2 would be finding a co-host property. And the cool thing is because you did property 1 and you already went through the homework of understanding, I know what it takes to find a 100K a year property, now you can do that again, but then basically talk that landlord into saying, hey, look, this property's furnished, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, you're asking 3K a month in rent. I actually think you can make closer to 6 to 7K a month in rent, and I'll manage it for you. Have you ever considered listing it as a short-term rental? Boom, now you list that second property as a co-host deal. You paid nothing out of pocket for it. And if you're taking a 10 to 20% commission on that, now that property will still produce about $1,000 a month for you. So really, in order for us to get to that target goal, Sam, of 6 to 7K per month, that's realistically, if we do a combination of arbitrage plus co-hosting, that's gonna be about 5 deals, right? 5 deals over the next 12 months. Certainly possible. But what we're likely gonna have to do is property 1 is arbitrage, property 2 is co-hosting, and then by that time, that'll be like 3 to 6 months down the line, then you should have the capital reserves from property number 1 to do another arbitrage deal. And then we just kind of rinse and repeat from there. And it allows you to get a little bit more creative with your capital and the revenue coming in from your business. After you get to property 3, 4, you have enough of that revenue coming in to where you can more easily deploy that into the next. Make sense?
Yep.
So overall, does the rough game plan and strategy make sense?
Yes. Yep.
Absolutely. I'm throwing a lot at you, man.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I'm throwing a lot at you. See, like, now, obviously, we did a very rough bird's eye view of like what the revenue potential would be on these units. What's gonna end up happening is like, you're with us, right? Like you're with the team. So what's gonna end up happening is you're gonna go out there and you're gonna start looking for property number 1, and you're gonna start prospecting, and you're gonna reach out to property owners, and you're gonna get a few interested landlords pretty quick. Before you take any of those deals, you're gonna send us that analysis, right? You're gonna lean on Adam, me, Sonny, Greg, Adnan, et cetera, send us the analysis. We're gonna validate that data and say, okay, Sam, we feel super confident that this property is actually gonna net what we think it's gonna net.
Yeah.
And then from there, we can help you make like the educated decision on whether or not you'd move forward with it, right?
Okay.
Overall though, really your next step would be to, did you already have your call with Greg?
Yeah.
All right, so did Greg kind of validate the rough like buy box of Pittsburgh and the kind of like what property? Okay, so now you have an understanding, Pittsburgh regulations, what properties are gonna be the most profitable. Then what's gonna happen is you're gonna wanna meet with Adnan on the team here, and he'll help practice that landlord pitch with you. So when you start to reach out to property owners, boom, you're gonna be able to do that with confidence. You're gonna get yeses. From there, man, you're off to the races. Then you're gonna lean on the team, make sure that we make this property number 1 a really, really solid experience, and it tees you up nicely for property 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sure. Yep.
Now, so far, any questions on this?
No.
Are you sure?
No, honestly, yeah.
He's going to be blowing up the chat later, man.
Yeah.
So now, the last thing here is like, okay, now we want to make sure that like we don't create another job for ourselves. This is more down the line that we're putting the cart before the horse. But once we get to property 3 to 5, right? Okay. Managing 1 of these, easy. 2 of these, easy. 3 of these, easy. Once you start getting 4, 5, 6, this is when you start to like, okay, I want to separate myself a little bit. And you have enough cash flow coming in where you can afford to plug in tools and hire systems, right? Now, what you're gonna wanna do after property number 4, I'm gonna put here, property 4 is hire virtual assistant. And at this point, this virtual assistant's gonna be $500, maybe $600 a month. They're gonna take a lot of the day-to-day operations off you and your wife's plate. Cool thing is by property like 5 to 6 is when your wife will be able to start doing this full time, which is nice. But at the end of the day, she doesn't wanna deal with messaging guests at 12 a.m. She doesn't wanna deal with like having to text the cleaner to come back to do a re-clean. She doesn't want to deal with like answering guests of like randomly on a Saturday about where the remote is and stuff.
Right.
That's what you want to hire this virtual assistant to do. Now, fortunately, we'll source and train that person for you, but then once you plug and play, because you had done the work of property 1 to 3, you'll know how to easily delegate those tasks to the Make sense?
Yep.
So really, man, that's your action plan. That's going to be our game plan to get us to 6 to 7K.
Okay.
And hopefully, have the wife stay at home a little bit more with the kids.
Yeah.
What questions? What are your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, is that like a virtual assistant per property or a virtual assistant per multiple properties?
Definitely going to be per multiple. We actually had about 1 virtual assistant per 5.
Okay.
Really, you don't need to even hire a second one until you need full 24/7 around the clock. Because the best way to do it is you'll stagger those 2 virtual assistants to be 24/7, meaning one of them will work a morning shift, one will work a night shift.
Yep.
And that's really the way to keep the calendar or to keep like your guests occupied 24/7 and always have somebody on deck to be able to help them. But like we didn't hire our first one until like property 5. We didn't hire our second until like property 10 to 20. And then really even at this point with us getting close to 40 plus, so you will never really need more than 3 until you exceed like 50 and beyond.
Sure.
Makes
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. What else?
I guess, so the cleaning and maintenance, is there a community for that, so that people can, source them, or have you experienced where other students, maybe they're in the same market, so they share cleaners?
Mm-hmm. Really good question too, which is like, okay, what sort of networking opportunities do I have to find good cleaners and reliable cleaners?
Yep.
Fortunately, I mean, Sam, Airbnb is such a massive platform now where there are so many tools that are created for us to make that so easy. And so many like small mom and pop businesses spawned, like small mom and pop cleaner businesses spawned because of this too. So what you'll end up doing when you actually land property number 1 is we'll recommend you to go onto Turno, and we'll kind of tell you how we bid for cleaners on there. Turno is one of many massive platforms where you can basically just bid for short-term rental cleaners. And you'll get 4 or 5 of them reaching out to you saying, hey, I charge this much, XYZ, I want to clean your property, etc. And then what you'll have the opportunity to do is vet them out, right? Both from messaging on the phone and then just giving them the opportunity to clean, and you pick the one that you like the best based on rate, based on the quality of the clean, etc. The cool thing is like, this is competitive now, Sam, so like you're gonna have people essentially fighting to work for you, which is nice. And then after that, you can use that same platform to plug it into your listings, and then they automatically get notified of bookings, extended stays, stuff like that. Make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
We'll teach you all that when you get to that point too.
Yep.
There's a lot of content on it, but that's going to be the engine that you're going to use to get started.
Sure. I mean, that's it for off the top of my head, honestly.
Yeah. Drink it from a fire hose, man.
Yeah, I kind of like a learn as you go type guy. So
cool.
Yeah.
Important thing is going to be staying consistent, Sam.
Yep.
One thing I get asked a lot is like, okay, what is the biggest area where people fail, or like what is the biggest pain point? What is the biggest struggle? And it's honestly just going MIA. That's it.
Yeah.
Anybody that has ever succeeded here is always like, sometimes life got in the way and they left and came back. But anybody that hasn't succeeded, it was simply just because they gave up. That's it. What's likely going to happen is you're going to get a lot of property owners that will say yes. They're going to pass off deals to you, and you're going to validate the numbers with us, and we're going to tell you, no, 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 because we don't like the numbers. That's where some people get, is like, you might go through a few no's before you get a yes. And it might be you saying no, right?
Right.
So it's really just a matter of staying consistent and like remembering why you did this.
Right.
Cool?
Yeah.
That's all I've got for you. Is there any other questions you have for me for now?
No, not right now.
Awesome, dude.
Good.
Well, I'm looking forward to you crushing it this year.
Yeah, appreciate it.